Hi everybody, I'm Hannah and welcome to Bookshelvish. Today we'll be talking about all of the books that I read in February. So this is only my second monthly reading wrap-up. So if you're new here, a little bit about me. I use both Goodreads and Storygraph to track every single thing that I read. I'm not somebody who updates them like every couple of pages that I read. It's really just when I finish a book that I'll go and throw that into both Goodreads and Storygraph. So today I'll be using primarily Storygraph just to show kind of an overview of my stats, and then we'll go through what books I read. I have been really leaning into rereads not this month anymore, but last month, and still a little bit this month. I think I was trying really hard not to reread a bunch the last couple of years, because when I first started reading again as an adult, I kind of feel like there's just so many books that I need to get into my head that I don't have time to do rereads, and I would make exceptions to that sometimes, but really only when I was rereading something in preparation for an upcoming sequel in a series. And so now some of these are because of that, but I'm also trying to just allow myself to reread if it's bringing me joy, while also obviously keeping in mind that I do need to get through a lot of books because my TBR is around 700 books right now. So that's embarrassing. Anyway, I had a lot of rereads this month. I was in a bit, honestly, I think, of a reading slump towards the end of January, and so that kind of helped kickstart me back into reading for February. So we'll go through my stats first, and I'll put them up here so that you can hopefully see what I'm talking about. So first up was moods. So this month, or in February, I read a lot of adventurous, tense, and emotional reads. I think that fits because I was reading a ton of fantasy and some dystopian stuff, and so those are always very tense and adventurous. Next moods were mysterious, dark, then followed by only a sliver of lighthearted, a sliver of funny, and a sliver of hopeful. So that makes it sound like I just had a depressive episode for all of February, which is not really the case, but sometimes it just be like that. So those are my moods. Pace, I read 47% fast and 53% medium. I think it says a lot that I have no slow-paced books in the whole month of February. I think I was really just trying to get through things and feel actually sucked into what I was reading, which doesn't really happen unless you have a medium or fast-paced book. So I'm also just not a big slow-paced girly anyway. Usually even in a quote normal month where I'm not rereading a bunch, I don't have a ton of slow-paced books, just because that's not really great entertainment for me these days. I read, 30% of my books for their length had under 300 pages. 65% had between 300 and 499, and then only 5% had 500 plus. So usually my 500 plus is quite a bit higher than this. I think the main reason that it's not is because I read a lot of really short books. One of the rereads I did was the Shatter Me series, and those have 6 full-length books and 5 novellas, and all of the novellas are 100 pages or less. So that really brought up my under 300 percentage from normal. The books themselves are pretty short too. None of them break the 500 plus at all. So I think that's kind of the main reason why this looks a bit different than it usually does. I read 100% fiction this month. Not surprised by that at all. And then my genres are a lot less varied than they usually are too. So I have mostly romance, followed by young adult, dystopian, which makes sense because Shatter Me is young adult and dystopian, followed by fantasy, and then contemporary and dead last, which usually it's a bit higher, and fantasy is normally a bit higher. I don't normally have any dystopian on there, not because I don't like it, I just don't read a ton of it recently. I feel like dystopian books really had a moment in the 2010s, and so now that moment's kind of wrapped up, I'm reading them a lot fewer and further between. As far as format, I have 80% print, 10% digital, and 10% audio, so that shakes out to 2 audio books and 2 ebooks. So I'm starting to bring audio back into the rotation. I listened to The Bodyguard. Well, we'll get into this, but I listened to 2 books on audio, and both of them were some pretty fun, lighthearted romances, which I think is a good fit for audio for me right now because it keeps me entertained and I don't feel like it's a slog. And so that's kind of what I was using audio for last year when I was reading, would be things that are on my TBR shelf that I really am not that excited to read, but I just kind of want to get through to say I read them and then can pass them on to a little free library or something like that. And then my digital books, I had an ARC, so that was digital. And then what else did I read digital? I think I counted one of my reads that I still have physically, but I mostly read it digital. So usually I try to track whatever format I actually read it in, as opposed to just like whether I owned it or not. And then I had 8 5 stars, 8 4 stars. Oh wait, how did I get 1 3.5 star? Oh, that was from a reread. Okay, so then technically 3 stars. So a lot of those 5 stars are from rereads. Why else would I be rereading them if they weren't 5 stars? I only had 1 5-star new to me read in February, which we'll get to, but I loved it. So one of my goals this year was to like start, or I guess stop giving out 5 stars so exuberantly. I want my 5 stars to really mean something. So those are my stats for February. So let's get into the individual books. This first series, I already kind of said, I reread the Shatter Me series. I'm not going to go through every single book because we would be here for forever. There are 11 of these books, and I read all of them in the month of February. So you'll see like the regular books, and then there's like this novella and this novella, which both have a set of 2 novellas in them. So I pretty much flew through these. Like, they're not hard reads. They're really fast. They're YA. They suck you in, easy to read. So I just love this series, and I wanted to reread it because I haven't read it actually since 2023. And that was the first time that I had read it, and I binged them. I think all of them I read within like 5 days while I was on my first ever Booksta trip to Charleston, which was super fun. And one of my friends brought these with her because she was done reading them. And so I took them, read them all. Anyway, so it had been a while, and I just kind of wanted to do a revisit, and it was a little bit of a kind of spontaneous buddy read with my friend Brie. And so yeah, read all of those, loved them. If you haven't read this series, it is dystopian. I think if you like The Hunger Games, you would like this. It's definitely leans more sci-fi than fantasy. It's supposed to be in the not too distant future world as we know it. It's technically like the world's divided into like sectors and whatever else, but where we are for the most part is in like Los Angeles area, or like what used to be Los Angeles. There's like a little bit of like climate aspects to it. There's like these people who have abilities that people aren't really sure what to do with. And there's a very regulated, oppressive government system that the main characters are basically trying to buck. So super good books. I would say read the first one. You will not, it's kind of Tamlins you, the first one. So give it until like book 2 or 3 before you really decide if you're going to like go all speed ahead or not. Also, people have a lot of disagreements as to whether you need to read the novellas. I think you need to read the novellas, at least the first one. Read the first novella because it gives you a point of view of a character that you probably won't like in the first book, and it makes you really understand that character and realize that they're not who the character from the first person's perspective like thinks that they are. And so I think that's really valuable for the rest of the series to have. It's a soul series for me. I love Shatter Me so much. Next, I did another reread, which you guys know about this one because this has been ongoing since last month. This is The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent, and this is the second in the Crowns of Neaxia series, the second in the Nightborn duet. I'm rereading these in preparation for I always forget the name of this, The Songbird in the Heart of Stone, which has already come out in like November, but I haven't read it yet. So my goal is to read that this month in March when I'm recording this. But I really enjoyed my reread of this one. It did take me forever. Somehow, I just feel like I wasn't doing it. You know what I mean? Like, I really enjoyed my time while I was reading it, but it was just like not one that I was itching to pick up. So I am glad I reread it though, because I did forget a lot of things that went down in this book. But I did give it 4 stars. So this is The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. Next, I read Prison Healer. This was an unexpected delight. So I read this as part of my Buddy Read Babes group. This was one of our co-hosts' picks, and I had it on my shelf, so I thought, why not? And it's about a healer who works in prisons. I did think that the middle was a little bit mushy. Like, I don't think it was the fastest paced book, but the end had a ton of twists that I truly did not see coming. And I'm not good at calling twists anyway, so like almost everything's a surprise to me regardless. But this did have a bunch of really, really good twists, even for my friends that like are good at twists. This really shook everybody. So I'm really excited to continue with this. I have the second book in this series on my TBR for March, so I'm hoping I get to that. But this is a YA fantasy. Technically, it's Blurb by Sarah J. Maas. So I think if you liked her books, you would like this one. It's really beautifully written. I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read Wretched by Emily McIntyre. I gave this one 3 stars. It is not my favorite of the series. It's probably my least favorite of the series so far, actually. This is a reimagining of Wizard of Oz. I feel like I really have to like the main character that we're getting like a majority of the POVs from, and I did not like the FMC in this really very much at all. I found her very annoying and like not someone that I could like root for super easily. I just wasn't that into it. It wasn't a bad book, but I just didn't like it more than I liked Scarred or Hooked. I still think Hooked is my favorite. That's Wretched. I would say pick it up if you're reading this series already, because you may as well, but it didn't make me excited for the other books. I do have Twisted, I think is the next one, and I think it's Aladdin on my TBR for March, so I will keep going with the series, but it didn't amaze me. Next, I read The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. This is one of the ones that I listened on audio to, and I really liked the narrator. This book was super cute and fun. I have never read a Catherine Center that I didn't love. I just had a good time reading this. It gave me the warm fuzzies. And so I think it was something new, something different, not a trope that you see very often. She's his bodyguard. It's kind of like a fake dating, forced proximity sort of situation, and I just thought it was super fun. And so if you like silly rom-coms, this one's for you. It definitely leaned heavy on the tropes, but I think that can be really good. I also heard that this is an interconnected standalone of a series. So the next one is the Rom-Commers, which I have on my March TBR, and then I have an arc of the Love Haters, which is the next one, and that comes out in May, but I have that to read too. So I'm kind of trying to read all of them before that arc is due and comes out so that I understand what's going on with it. So that's The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. Then next we have another Buddy Read Babes book. This was my pick for March. It's Metal Slinger by Rachel Schneider. I have heard almost nothing about this book until it started blowing up on Bookstagram. So I would say if you like romantasy, you should try this one. I did have a friend that did not like it really at all. She gave it a 1 star. But I do think she's an outlier. I really liked this one all the way through. I really thought it was going to be a 5 star until something happens at the end. Talk about not being able to spoil anything. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about, and I want all of your thoughts. But I thought it completely destroyed all of the character development that had happened up until that point. And even though I think if some kind of version of that ending had happened, I would have been okay with it, because I did not hate a character that I think we were supposed to hate the whole time. That character kind of came back in a way that I wasn't expecting, but I wasn't happy with the way that it happened. And so I'm gonna have to read the next one in this series just to get some closure. But I really kind of feel like the author did the readers really dirty with it. And I know if I reread that I would probably be able to see where it was coming from, but I felt so blindsided when reading it, and that frustrated me a lot. So that's Metal Slinger. It's a 4-star read, but I do recommend it if you like romantasy. It also kind of had some Ever King, Pirates of the Caribbean vibes, which I really enjoyed. I also think if you like Spark of the Everflame, this would probably be a good book for you. Although my friend that hated this one loves Spark, so do with that what you will. Next, we have my only 5-star read from the month of New to Me Reads. I have been excited for this book for an entire year. It's probably my most anticipated of this whole year. I went to a signing event with the author and then some of my friends, and then we basically spent that entire night just binging this book. And it was so fun. Easily one of my top reading experiences, I'm sure of all of 2025, but definitely of this year so far. And that is Rebel Witch by Kristen Ciccarelli. Heartless Hunter was my top read of 2024. So I went in knowing that I was expecting a lot from this book, and also trying to temper my expectations, because a lot of times the sequel just doesn't live up to it, but this sequel lived up to it. Oh my goodness. I had so much fun reading this. I love Gideon and Rune so much, and this is exactly what I want in all of my sequels. It did exactly what I wanted it to do. I do think that I like Heartless Hunter better, but I gave them both 5 stars. I think this, I was just expecting the world from it, and then also trying not to expect the world from it. So there was just a lot for it to live up to, whereas Heartless Hunter was just kind of a super fun surprise. So that's Rebel Witch by Kristen Ciccarelli. Highly recommend this duology. Next, this was my second of my 2 audiobooks. This is Under Lock and Key by Lana Ferguson. I've heard a lot of mixed feedback. Some people love Lana Ferguson, some people don't. To be totally forthright, as you can probably tell, this is a bit of a monster romance, but I would say it's like monster romance light. Like, it's not like, I don't know, sometimes there's like different shaped peens and stuff, and like that's not really what we're dealing with here. It's mostly, I would say, magical realism more than anything else, just because there's like a curse that's been placed on his family and they turn into the Loch Ness Monster and like all this stuff. And so I thought it was super cute. I gave it 4 stars because I don't really think it like blew my mind, but I thought it was a really fun read and I felt like it wasn't too long and I just had a good time. So yeah, I think if you're looking for something light, it definitely did have good Scotland vibes, and I love Scotland vibes. So this definitely would appeal for like a very specific type of read if you're in the mood for it. I would say don't read it if you're like not sure, because probably there's a lot of opportunity for it not to work for you. And then my last read of February was a reread of Throne of Glass. So if you live under a rock, perhaps you haven't heard of this book. Otherwise, I think everybody knows. I'm trying to reread one SJM book a month this year, and so this was number 2. I just love it. I don't understand people who say that Throne of Glass starts out slow or boring. I've never felt like this book is slow or boring. It does read, obviously, a bit younger than the later books in the series do, both because Sarah J. Maas's writing, I think, matures, and then also because the characters are younger. I mean, they're like 18 in this. I do also think a big part, if you don't like Throne of Glass or Crown of Midnight and you think they start slow and they're boring and whatever else, I think that most of that feedback comes from people who don't start with the Assassin's Blade. I would start with Assassin's Blade. For me, and again, you can make your own decisions however you want, but if for no other reason, I feel like the people who wish they had read differently are usually people who didn't read Assassin's Blade first. I feel like everyone who reads the Assassin's Blade first is, generally speaking, happy with that decision. So, I don't know, for what it's worth, I would say read Assassin's Blade first. But yeah, I enjoyed my reread of this so much. It was nice to not binge it, because I do think a lot of times I'm just trying to like get through books, and so really like slowing down and taking a long time to go through it was nice, because I've not really done that with Sarah J. Maas books previously. So yeah, these are all the books that I read in February 2025, and thank you so much for watching. Let me know what your favorite book of February was down below, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching.